On today's show, we have again rummaged through the Speedweek archives to bring you some blasts from the past. First up, we wind back 25 years to 1996 and head to Eastern Creek Raceway, where we look back on the Australian Drag Racing Championship Grand Final, incorporating Top Fuel, Top Door Slammer and Top Alcohol. Then we wind forward to 2009 and head to Cabarita Beach on the Tweed Coast of New South Wales, where we look back on the final round of that year's Australian V8 Superboat Championship. This is Speedweek.
Hello and welcome to Sydney's Eastern Creek Raceway for the 1996 Australian Drag Racing Series Grand Finale. To kick off, it's highlights from Top Fuel qualifying. Joining me in the central commentary position is Kevin Prendergast. Kevin, Top Fuel is hot at Eastern Creek once again.
Certainly is, Nathan. 8 cars entered in the 1996 Grand Finale. We've got 2 days of qualifying, and so far both of the Shell Rocket Graham Cowan cars have been down the track, but unfortunately have withdrawn under somewhat interesting circumstances. At this stage of the game, going into the second day of qualifying, now 6 cars settling for their positions in the field.
Jim Reed, the first car down the track on Friday's qualifying. How did he go? One of the quickest passes in the country, a 494, but the speed 295 miles an hour or 472 kilometres an hour. The team were extremely happy with that. Qualifying then moved into the night, and Terry Saney was the first man out to see if he could improve on a 5:30 on Thursday.
Yes, the Saney team really proving that they have a handle on this engine now. Slow development is producing good, consistent results, and a first out 5:30 yesterday really did surprise a number in the field.
Yes, they've certainly been trying a number of new things with this car, as they always do when they bring it to the racetrack. Have run as quick as 5.24 seconds around the 270 mile an hour mark. Terry's run into the 260s here before at Eastern Creek Raceway. Let's see how he goes this time. Well, terrible tyre shake for the Eagle Silicon Ignition Leads team. In fact, they split the fuel tank on the car from the amount of tyre shake and had to do a lot of work to that car overnight to get it back to the racetrack for Saturday's eliminations. Now Brad Simpson came out in the second of the Sandoz Cranes Top Fuel dragsters.
Yes, Brad was one of the competitors who was moving cars over the period of the weekend. Brad originally returned from America to drive the second Shell Rocket for Graham Cowan's team, but after the withdrawal of the cars yesterday, he was offered the ride in the second Santo car, and this is his first qualifying shot.
Well, a loose front wing on the front of the car caused the car to go in quite a substantial wheel stand and in turn unload the tyres, which then destroyed the motor. A lot of damage done to that car, but a 596 still put him in the field.
Yes, a very spectacular run there, and certainly baptism of fire. Now, this was a run that everyone was looking forward to. Really, it was a try for the first of the 300, Nathan.
Yes, Jim Reed up against Glenn Mikres. These two have been stating all weekend that each one wants to be the first man to run 300 miles an hour. Glenn Mikres in the number 1 Sandoz Cranes Top Fuel Dragster has really been throwing some big horsepower at that car. It's just been a matter of whether or not he can get it to the racetrack on this occasion. Jim Reed, he's already the number 1 qualifier, a 494 from him. He's just looking to see if he can perhaps run a little bit quicker, but as you said, Kevin, 300 miles an hour is what they're looking for. Problems for Reed. Mikres decides to drive it all the way. The shootout a little bit early, but a 5:08 at only around 240 odd mile an hour or 376 kilometres an hour put him into the number 2 qualifying position.
Now the final qualifying run on Friday night, Robin Kirby on a solo. Kirby came out earlier in the day but had to shut the car down. Always a consistent performer. He really has developed this car. Took it to Japan again this year and ended up winning the first of the 2 international races. A very well-respected top fuel driver now in Australian competition.
I have been told with some of that Japanese yen that he earned overseas, he's bought some new bits. Can the car run quicker than we've seen it before? Well, it dropped a few cylinders off the start line, but cleaned them up nicely to run a good 5:52. 436 kilometres an hour, which is 272 miles an hour, was around about Kirby's quickest ever speed. So after 2 tough days of qualifying, this is how the field looks.
Jim Reed on top with a 495. Number 2, Glenn Mikres 508. Terry Sainty in 3. Robin Kirby in 4. And Brad Simpson wraps up a 5-car field.
Good afternoon and welcome to Speedweek. Coming up on today's show, we've got highlights from Top Fuel Eliminator from the 1996 Australian Drag Racing Series Grand Finale. Joining me at the moment is the number 1 qualifier in Top Fuel Eliminator, Jim Reed. Jim, a fantastic pass, 494. Can we expect anything quicker?
Well, fortunately we've got the bye, so we're looking to do a bit of experimenting which could result in a quicker time. We want 300 mile an hour.
Yeah, the 300 mile an hour is a big thing at the moment. Who's your biggest opposition?
Glenn Mikres. That car's run 298 here, so we're hoping to try and get down the track first and get 300.
Well, a fairly subdued Jim Reed there in front of a huge crowd looking forward to a great night's racing. Reed literally has to start the car and pull into stage to obtain another Australian Championships, but he's got some targets and one of those is 300 mile an hour during the night.
Jim Reed, a solo pass in the first round. We saw only a 5-car field in qualifying. Therefore, he gets the solo pass being the number 1 qualifier. A great 494 from him. He ran a couple of back-to-back 4s at Willowbank at the Winter Nationals. Actually the only man in Australia to run back-to-back 4s.
Well, the weather is great today. The track is in excellent condition. Big burnout there from Reed. He shows he's serious, and I think that tonight's air they should be able to produce some very good numbers.
Yes, all weekend we've heard from Mikres and Reed about how they want to run 300 mile an hour. It's the only barrier left in Australian top fuel racing that hasn't been broken. 4 seconds obviously belongs to Graham Cowan. He did that a couple of years ago, but 300 miles an hour has been around for some time. Jim Reed's got the solo pass. That last qualifying run between himself and Mikres on Friday night, people were looking at that as perhaps being the first 300 mile an hour. Well, Jim's got a chance now. The only car down the racetrack, he can snatch that title.
It'll be interesting to see whether he does in fact drive it right through or just take it off the start line, make sure his clutch is right and shut it down at half track, looking to moving into the semi-finals. He's got the option, but I think that target of 300 mile an hour will mean he'll drive it right through.
Well, Jim has had clutch problems for around about 18 months. They only figured them out at the Winter Nationals. He's now doing a lot of testing, trying some new things with the car. Let's see how he goes this time. 300 mile an hour maybe on the cards. The car looks great. Nice and straight, very, very fast pass from Jim Reed. We looked at the clocks, it should be quick.
499, that backs up his 494, and I would think that's a new Australian record at 463 kilometres an hour. Interestingly, the car did black track all the way down and in fact started to drop a couple of cylinders, but a great 499 puts him once again in the Australian record.
The next pairing out in round 1 of Top Fuel Eliminator sees Glenn Mikres up against Brad Simpson, the 2 Sandoz Cranes car. They have had a lot of work to do on that car of Simpson's after that big fire last night. It burnt off a lot of gear off the back of the car and destroyed the engine. You can see Simpson there. They're still working on it, as a matter of fact, as the car came into the staging lanes. They tried to start it. We heard it kick into life there, but it's died back down again. Let's hope there's no problems for Simpson.
It would seem that they're having some fire-up problems there. I get the feeling that it's not going to go, and it looks like Mikres will get a solo into the semi-finals.
We'll wait to hear on final news. Yes, Simpson getting out of the car now, so that's bad luck. But at least one of the Santos Cranes cars is definitely going to make it through, and that's Glenn Mikres. He gets the solo pass.
Mikres now moving into stage. The decision he will make again as to whether or not he just runs the car to half track, which gives him plenty of time for the next round, or he runs it out the back door.
I'm pretty much sure we'll see this car go the full length of the quarter mile. It looks pretty good at this point. A car with the shootout a little bit early, as we saw in his last qualifier last night. A 5:28 this time, 402 kilometres an hour. The speed definitely down for Mikres. Now, we're not sure whether he's elected to pull the chute or whether he's had a problem. A huge crowd here in attendance at Eastern Creek, and as we can see, Mikres with what appears to be clutch problems, the car on a trolley jack having to be pushed away, so we can only assume that the rear end is either locked up or they've struck some severe clutch problems.
Well, the team's had a lot of work with those two cars over the weekend, so between now and the next round, I'd say Mikres has got another big long crash.
The next pairing in Top Fuel Eliminator sees Terry Saney up against Robin Kirby. We talked about Kirby's trip to Japan. He's back now doing some big things. He's got some new parts. As a matter of fact, we'll have a new car in the not too distant future. This car returns to the States, where it will be restored to its former Shirley Muldowney glory.
Kirby, of course, running up against Terry Sainty in the 3-valve billet engine Sainty-powered dragster. Sainty qualified in the number 3 position with a 5:36, and the consistency of this operation has fairly good. They had to work some work overnight with the split fuel tank, but I'd say if they've got the same combination in it, then Kirby will have to be right on the button to drive around in.
Yes, Robin Kirby has really been improving with this car. Ran 272 mile an hour, which was around about his fastest ever speed. Very quick competitor. Not a lot of people want to meet him in the first round, but it's becoming a similar situation with the Saney camp. They're getting so consistent and so quick that if you slip up just that 1 inch, the Saneys can bite you. Both cars going into stage now. We can see the plenty of fuel pumping out of the pipes side by side as they head for half track. Saney with the edge, but looks as though he's got a problem. Robin Kirby gets there only by about half a car length. A 5:38 beats a 5:40. A strong pass there. 430 kilometres an hour for Robin Kirby.
Let's have a look at it on the replay now. This was a very good top fuel race. Off the start line, pretty even. Both of the cars moving down the track side by side. Kirby's starting to drop cylinders over the top end, and just as they get to the lights, the Sainty's starting to throw out some smoke. But a very good run. There we have a look. The fire crew just checking to make sure there's no fire in the Sainty car once it pulled up. Obviously some clutch and maybe a loose fuel line. But a very good race to wrap up the first round of top fuel.
Good afternoon and welcome to Sydney's Eastern Creek Raceway for the high horsepower action of the Top Door Slammers. 7 cars competing here today. Let's check out the qualifying order. Number 7 in the Holden Statesman, Rob Broadbent. The number 6 qualifier, New South Welshman, Benny Gatz. Holding out the number 5 qualifying position, Lucky Belleri in his Commodore. Number 4, the second of the Castrol cars, Troy Critchley. Number 3 from Queensland, Peter Gratz in a 57 Chevrolet. The number 2 qualifier driving the Commodore Hearst, Michael King. And the number 1 qualifier, the man himself, Victor Bray, 6.50 seconds. A great run from him. Well, the 1996 grand finale here at Eastern Creek Raceway is set to be an absolute ripper. We've got a huge crowd in attendance. The weather is fantastic. The first pairing out in round 1 of Top Door Slammer sees Benny Gatt on screen now up against Peter Gratz. This is going to be a great matchup. Gratz just moving forward now in his 57 Chevrolet. Not known for very large burnouts. He can obviously do them when required to, but does the small, short, sharp, businessman style burnouts. Just gets the required amount of heat in those tyres. Time now for Benny Gatt. Car down on RPM a little bit. Both of these cars beautifully presented. Top Door Slammer, an immaculate class. As I said, a huge crowd you can see there in attendance. We've had some great weather here at Eastern Creek. Fairly unusual, our last grand finals that we've had here at Eastern Creek. They've been rained out, blown out, you name it. We've had all forms of weather curses. But the sun is shining here today. Things are hotting up. Peter Gratz for Valvoline and Bumper to Bumper. The Queensland competitor has used this event as a test bed. There will be a change of rules as far as the overdrive is concerned for Top Door Slammer next season, and Peter Gratz obviously realises that he's got to get on top of that tune-up, and has used this event to try out his new combination with his new Whipple supercharger. Benny Gatt driving this Ford. This is the world's quickest and fastest all Ford. It has a Ford engine, obviously Ford bodied. Has run into the 660s before at well over 200 mile an hour. Both cars get away cleanly, but it's Gatt with the red light. Benny Gatt pulls the red light. Peter Gratz will charge through to take an easy win and stops the clocks at a very quick 675, 332 kilometres an hour. A great run from Gratz in the first round of Top Door Slammer. Well, that's a taste of the action still to come. We've got the next pairing about to come our way, and that will be Michael King in the Auto 1 Commodore. This is a hearse, rather unusual combination. You can see they're not using a remote starter. Michael actually has a separate starter on this car, as does Rob Broadbent on screen now. Broadbent in his new Holden Statesman. Michael King, the hearse, does some big burnouts. Oh, that's a great performance from him. The crowd absolutely love the tyre smoking action of these door slammers. 2,500 horsepower from these cars. Broadbent on screen now, a rather unusual combination. He runs a quad cam McGee. It's an Australian designed engine. He runs a Whipple supercharger on top of it. Michael King, on the other hand, in the hearse, he runs a tried and true Keith Black Hemi. It's got the old Root style supercharger on top. You can see the GM supercharger, rather smaller in general size. You can always pick the PSIs of the Whipples. They tend to sit out of the bonnet a lot more. The engine in King's car actually is an ex-Top Alcohol funny car motor from the States. Has run a 580 at well over 230 mile an hour. And Michael's decided that he wants to put it in a Commodore, throw a coffin in the back and see how well he goes. He's up against Broadbent. Broadbent with a new combination. The car a little bit loose off the start line. King's going to charge through and take a convincing win. This looks quick. Well, a little bit of smoke out from underneath the car. That's not good at all. Michael King could have some problems, but a 671 at 331 kilometres an hour. And King with a little bit of smoke, a little bit of debris I can see falling out from underneath the car. Perhaps a fair bit of work for him to do in between rounds. Okay, the next pairing about to move forward is Lucky Belleri in his Commodore up against Troy Critchley. Critchley in the second of the Castrol cars. Belleri, we've seen him compete at Eastern Creek on a number of occasions. Here comes Critchley, the second of the Castrol cars. Mate, we should see a big burnout here. Oh, doesn't disappoint at all. Troy Critchley, a nice strong tyre smoking burnout from him. Lucky Belleri just backing up now. Two-door Commodore. The car looks a treat. The custom line of Troy Critchley is actually probably the world's quickest and fastest Ford-bodied car, obviously not powered by a Ford engine. That title is held, as I said earlier on, by Benny Gatt. But Critchley in the custom line would probably hold down the world's quickest and fastest Ford title at the moment. The car has run into the 640s before at over 215 miles an hour. It's got a lot of speed on board. The car's just edging forward as we speak. Critchley's been suffering with tyre shake problems throughout qualifying. The car was competing in Townsville on an earlier race and actually did some severe damage to the rear of the car. Hopefully they've cured the tyre shake problems this time. Both cars away cleanly, and it's Belleri out in front. This is an upset. Look at the Commodore out in front at the moment. Critchley with a top-end charge. Who gets there? It's Belleri. A 729 beats a 718. 207 mile an hour top end charge from Critchley, but it wasn't enough. Belleri had him off the start line. Let's go to the replay and cast your eyes to the Castrol car. Look at it get loose. You can see the tyres shaking underneath of it. Suffered that tyre shake that I was talking about earlier. He had to pedal it, had to back it off, lost that edge at the start, and although he had a 207 mile an hour top end charge, it just wasn't enough to catch Belleri. Now the man himself, Victor Bray. Listen to the crowd. Absolute incredible support for the Castrol Konica 57 Chevrolet of Victor Bray. 6.500. That's what he qualified in number one with. The car has run 6:25 at 225 miles an hour. The world's quickest and fastest top door slammer. He only just holds onto that title, and there's a number of American competitors that are very keen to get over and challenge Victor and try to take that ET and speed record off him. Johnny Rocker and John Skelpy will be travelling over from the United States of America at the end of this year. The series starts on the 30th of November at Ravenswood Raceway, and we'll see the cars back here at Eastern Creek on December 21st for their round of the USA versus Australia Top Door Slammer Challenge. Victor about to go into stage. He brings the revs up, a lot like Top Alcohol. These things basically alcohol cars with doors. Oh, nice strong pass from Victor Bray. A 6:55, 351 kilometres an hour. That is 219 miles an hour. A big run from Victor Bray. We've got highlights from Top Alcohol, the 2,500 horsepower methanol burning beast. The number 7 qualifier in the only altered in the field, Jeff Burnett.
Number 6 qualifier, Mark Brew from Queensland with a 5.97.
The number 5 qualifier in the Oldsmobile Cutlass, Stephen Reed from Queensland.
John Noonan slots into number 4 position with a 5.92.
The number 3 qualifying position goes to Stan Tindall, a New South Welshman.
New national funny car record holder Steve Harker in number 2 position with a 5.82.
And the number 1 qualifier with a strong 5.80, Gary Phillips from Queensland. A huge crowd assembled here today, once again for the 1996 Australian Drag Racing Series Grand Finale. Eastern Creek Raceway has finally got some good weather and some fantastic racing about to come your way. The first person down the track in the first round of Top Alcohol is Gary Phillips. Gary actually was the number 1 qualifier, only 7 cars in the field, therefore he's got the solo pass. And in order to save parts, save on maintenance, Gary's just going to put the car into stage and cruise it down the racetrack.
Well, there may only be 7 cars in the field, Nathan, but what a field. The first ever all 5-second Top Alcohol field, and Phillips is simply preserving his parts for the next round.
The next pairing out in Top Alcohol sees Jeff Burnett, the world's quickest and fastest alcohol altered. It comes in at around about the 3rd quickest altered in the world. He ran a 5.98 in qualifying in that car and was very, very pleased with his performance. But this man on screen, Steve Harker, Kevin, hasn't he come on strong?
Yes, he's certainly set the pits on fire over the last 2 days with his performances in Top Alcohol. He ran 254 miles an hour for a new national record, 5.82 for number 2 qualifying position. Certainly a real big threat now in Top Alcohol racing.
Yes, when he ran that 5.82, he was alongside Gary Phillips. Gary Phillips ran a 5.80. That was their first pass in qualifying on Thursday and is actually the quickest side-by-side pass in the history of Australian drag racing for Top Alcohol.
Jeff Burnett, on the other hand, in number 7 qualifying position. Burnett converted to the T-bucket body after his fiberglass funny car body was sold to New Zealand. He since, of course, has set the pits on fire again by becoming one of the quickest open-wheeled altereds in the world, and a fabulous performance, 5.98 in qualifying.
Yes, it certainly is good to see the altereds back into drag racing. Jeff Burnett doing it with style, a 5.98. Very quick stuff from him, but the speed merchant has got to be Steve Harker. They bump him into stage now. You can hear the revs starting to build on both sides of the racetrack. Harker's the man with the horsepower at the moment. Can Burnett get out on him and try to get an edge in the first half of the racetrack? Both cars side by side, but I think it's going to be Harker all the way. Burnett doing nothing wrong, but you just can't get past the speed from Steve Harker.
Steve Harker takes the win with a 5.94 at 401 kilometres per hour, once again backing up that fabulous speed that he's had all weekend.
The next pairing out, we'll see Mark Brew, a rather unusual combination for him with the small block powered car, up against Stan Tindall.
Stan Tindall, the oldest man in the field at some 61 years of age, but he certainly has chased the current leader Gary Phillips in the points all season.
Nice big burnout from Tindall there, using a lot of RPM. He likes to get those big rear Goodyears nice and hot. Same with Brew.
Mark Brew, of course, in the small block Chev-powered dragster. This car's had difficulty all weekend because the small blocks rely on a very quick 60-footer and a very quick half track. The problem is they're very, very suspect when it comes to the clutch and tyre setup off the start line.
Yes, Brew has been struck with some pretty bad tyre shake over the last couple of race meetings. As a matter of fact, has broke the wheelie bars and the rear end of the car before. But they're trying to find a combination to make the car hook up here today. The conditions are ideal. Tindall, we know he's quick, can run into the 580s at well over 230 miles an hour.
Backing up now to move into stage for both of these. You would have to say on performances all year that Stan Tindall's got the consistency. He's been running in the 580s virtually for the whole season. Mark Brew, on the other hand, has shown the potential of the car, but it is just that suspect. You notice the crewman there just spraying the butterflies with alcohol to make sure that the butterflies don't seize up in the cold.
Yes, the amount of airspeed drawn in through the butterflies, a lot of ice can form, have to make sure that they are nice and free. Tindall had a few minor problems during qualifying. The car wasn't quite as quick as it should be. They're both into stage now. You can hear the revs up and down on both sides of the track. The small block comes out hard and goes into violent tyre shake. Stan Tindall all the way down the racetrack. He's got a bit of a wild ride himself, but gets the win.
Stan Tindall, 595 at 380 kilometres an hour. We saw there exactly what we said about Mark Brew. Very quick off the line, but then tyre shake took over and there was no chance. On replay there, see how much it shook and actually got out of shape, Nathan.
Yes, the car, violent tyre shake, but watch Tindall. He himself had a bit of a driving job. The car started to float towards the centre of the racetrack. Pulled it back, a nice drive job, still a 595. From the top of the racetrack now, you can see how Bruce straight away into tyre shake. The car heads for the centre line. Now watch Tindall. The car starts to float. You watch the tyre marks and he really is fighting that wheel. A great drive from both men.
And of course in top alcohol, only a relatively small wing on the car, so not as much downforce. You see how small it is compared with a top fuel car, and obviously that allows the back of the car to move around a lot more than it would do.
You can see there, watch the tyre marks on the racetrack. Look at how they chatter. Instant tyre shake for Mark Brew off the start line there. John Noonan faces up against Steve Reed in the next pairing.
Steve Reed, former Australian top alcohol champion, but really has struggled this year. For some reason, they haven't had the consistency that they've normally had and have been struggling to get past first round in some cases.
John Noonan, and the winner of this event last year, has the speed and has the ET, but Noonan does also suffer a little bit from consistency. Nice burnout from him though.
Only 200ths of a second separate these two cars in qualifying. Noonan at number 4 and Stephen Reed at number 5.
Stephen Reed has really picked up the performance of this car of late, has really found some big speeds, well over 240 mile an hour from that car. Noonan, you can see the big Whipple supercharger hanging off the top of that motor. One of the few cars in top alcohol racing that still has the Whipple supercharger. Most of the competitors now go to the PSI.
Okay, you see the hatch there on the Newlon sponsored funny car of Steve Reed. That allows the tyre smoke that builds up inside the cabin after the burnout to escape. It allows the driver to clear the cab so he can see what's going down the racetrack. So Noonan will be in the Auto 1 lane, that's the lane closest to the camera, with Queenslander Stephen Reed in the wins lane.
Good to see the pairing between the dragster and the funny car. Only in Australia will you see this happening in top alcohol. The dragsters run a rather smaller engine combination of around 450 to 470 cubic inches. The funny cars, on the other hand, they're up around the 520 to 540 mark.
Crewman there just making sure that vapour doesn't come out of the exhaust pipe onto the tyre. That's a problem that John Noonan had a season or so ago.
Both cars moving into stage now. Wait for the build in the RPM. The cars go into pre-stage, then the revs come up around about the 4,000 RPM mark, maybe 5,000 RPM if the start line's really good. Both cars heading into stage now. They're in the starter's hands. One flash there, gone. Looks like there was a bit of tyre shake for Noonan there. We can see something hanging off the car, but the speed from the funny car at the top end of the racetrack. Stephen Reed gets the win, a 6:02.
Reed wins with a great 388 kilometres per hour run. Looking at it, the replay will notice that Reed gets out very well, but Noonan's car goes into violent tyre shake, and in fact it rattles loose one of the breather tubes. You can see that hanging out the back off the rocket cover. A wild ride for Noonan there, but Steve Reed very easy win for him, 6:02. Again, looking at the replay, Nathan.
Yes, you watch these cars off the start line, you can see Noonan go into awesome tyre shake, but it's obvious that Reed's car's making power. Look at the tyre marks behind the car. Look how it streaks and black tracks all the way down the quarter mile. A great run from both competitors. Noonan, a big top end charge there, but not enough to get there. Reed gets the win. That closes the first round of Top Alcohol. 4 cars remain here at Eastern Creek Raceway, the semi-finals of Top Door Slammer. We've already seen some great action from these 2,500 horsepower beasts. Plenty more to come. Peter Gratz up against Rob Broadbent. Now, we saw Broadbent take a lose to King in the first round. King had actually come in 10 pounds underweight. He got the win, they put him on the scales, and he was unfortunately 10 pounds underweight in the Auto 1 Commodore. The thing is, Michael King also did some severe engine damage on that last pass, kicking a conrod out. The parts lost from the motor would have made up the required weight that was lost. Either way, Michael King unable to make it back to the semi-finals. Rob Broadbent is slotted in to face up against Peter Gratz in the Valvoline 57 Chevy. This should be a great matchup. Gratz just backing up now. This team has come a long way, as I said earlier on. Gratz testing with his new Whipple supercharger. You can see the massive size of that supercharger hanging out of the front of the 57 Chevy. Broadbent with an unusual combination. It's a 426 cubic inch McGee engine. That's a quad overhead cam setup, Australian design. They get a lot of horsepower out of them. They do rev very hard, obviously being overhead cam. And smaller cubic inch, smaller capacity, only 426 cubic inch. Gratz comes in around about the 518, 520 cubic inch mark. Broadbent's into stage. We wait on Gratz. The two of them edge forward. You can hear the revs build. One flash there, gone, and Gratz with a huge hole shot. Broadbent all out of shape. His race is over. And Peter Gratz picks up the win, a 7:08. 327 kilometres now, a good soft sorting pass for him, and puts him in a good position when they head to the finals. Who will he face? It'll be either Victor Bray or Lucky Belleri. Here comes Victor Bray. Well, once again, a huge reception from the crowd here at Eastern Creek. 25,000 people packed on the hill for the grand finale. This is the last grand finals here at Eastern Creek, the last grand finals ever, as a matter of fact. The Australian National Drag Racing calendar changes as of next season. We have a short season in between, and then it all gets jumbled around. Belleri backing up now. You can see the sun has gone down, the lights taking effect here at Eastern Creek. Drag racing very spectacular under lights. Victor Bray for Castrol Konica, the world's quickest and fastest door slammer. He runs a PSI supercharger, as does Lucky Belleri. You can see him just putting the fluid across the injector hats. That's either petrol or methanol, and it's so the amount of airspeed sucking in through the injector hat can actually freeze over, and it just frees it up a little bit, stops the butterflies from freezing shut. Both cars are into pre-stage. You can hear the revs starting to climb. 6 inches away from the start line, they'll bump it in. You'll see one flash and they're gone. Oh, Bray gets away. He's got some chasing to do. Gets right out of shape. Heads for the centre line, but the top-end speed of this car is incredible. Victor Bray, a 682 this time, 337.2 kilometres an hour. And we'll have a look at it on the replay here. Watch how loose Bray gets. I'm sure he's had to back off. The car heads straight for the centre line, pulls it back towards the middle of the track. The car a little bit loose, he's had to pedal it. Belleri had the jump on him, but the top end speed of this Castrol Konica 57 Chevy is to be seen. Time now to check out the semi-finals of Top Alcohol here at Eastern Creek Raceway. The crowd has swelled even more with the conditions improving a little bit, Kevin. The temperature's coming down a bit. The cars will be making plenty of horsepower now.
Yes, as we move into the evening, this is where it really does get serious. Any one of these 4 competitors left in the semi-finals can win this race.
You can see the funny car there with the body up. The Reed family just firing up their Top Alcohol funny car. Really is a unique form of motorsport, the funny car. They'll lower the body down over the chrome molly chassis very, very shortly. You can see that going down now. They'll lock it into place.
All of these cars, of course, started by a remote aircraft's starter motor that actually clips to the front of the supercharger.
Nice burnout from Phillips there. A bigger one from Reed, making sure that he's got a nice pair of hot sticky tyre marks down on the racetrack. Very important part of drag racing is the burnout, and looks great.
Crowd really enjoying this action here at the 1996 Grand Finale, and Top Alcohol really has been the class bracket in racing so far today.
You can see there the Top Alcohol cars run a 3-speed manual transmission, a Lenco transmission, which is manually shifted by either the buttons, which we saw on Gary Phillips' steering wheel earlier on, or off a lever, which is located either between their legs or just below the steering wheel on the dragsters and funny cars.
You'll also notice there on the side of the engine, twin magnetos. This is a V8 engine, but it's got 16 spark plugs. Again, the crewman there spraying the butterflies to make sure that the cold air doesn't actually ice up the throttle before leaving the start line.
The engines in these cars very similar to that of Top Fuel, although they run on methyl alcohol rather than nitro, putting out around about 2,500 horsepower, still adequate for the job, but they get it to the racetracks slightly different through that manual transmission.
Crewman there just once again spraying the very good air. You'll see the crewman about to turn the data logger on the computer to ensure that they get all the information for the run to make the decisions on tuning the car for the final.
The sun's dipped down a little bit. We can see the pre-stage lights on the top of the Christmas tree illuminated. Wait for the stage lights. Both cars are in. I think it's Phillips with the whole shot. The dragster streaks ahead. The funny car shuts it off early, and it's going to be Gary Phillips. A nice quick pass from him.
A 584 at 379 kilometres per hour. A very good win there. Straight off the start line, he took a car length and he just literally drove away from the funny car to take the win.
Another dragster versus funny car battle. This time it's Steve Harker. Harker, the new Australian national record holder for both the speed and ET records. In qualifying on Friday, all 6 records in Top Alcohol. That's records for Top Alcohol, Ultra Dragster and Funny Car, both speed and ET, were smashed.
Steve Harker there, very strong burnout. He certainly has been the sensation of the race, but the sly old fox Stan Tindall, he's a hard man to beat on any racetrack.
He certainly is very quick, very consistent. Harker has really come of age at this race meeting, or as a matter of fact, has done some testing prior to this event and really had found a combination.
You'll notice there on the top of the supercharger, we were talking about it icing up. You can visually see there ice starting to form on top of the butterflies. That's because of the cold air being drawn into the supercharger. It's fairly dense air, there's water in it, and it's starting to ice up. Now the crews have to keep spraying the front of the supercharger butterflies to make sure that the throttle doesn't stick on the car.
Just a quick note, that speed of 254.94 miles an hour for Steve Harker is actually faster than the national speed record for Top Alcohol Funny Car in the United States.
You see Auto 1 Andy there waving at the crowd in the background alongside the Coca-Cola blow-up bottle there. High-Tech Oils, the sponsors of Stan Tindall. Stan hails from Wyong in New South Wales, and as we mentioned earlier, the Elder Statesman. Good graphic shot there of the dragster, twin parachutes on the back, big wide tyres, very sticky after the burnout, safety mechanism holding the blower down in case of an explosion. And of course we can see in the background the lights really that add to the atmosphere of night drag racing.
Certainly is nothing like drag racing under lights. That's what the crowd have packed in here tonight to see. Both cars into pre-stage. You can hear the revs building up once again. Look at the raw fuel clearing itself out of Tindall's motor. He edges it in, just waiting on Harker. Both cars get away. Look at the front wheels in the air for Harker, but out of shape. He's crossed the centre line. Stan Tindall will pick up the win.
Stan Tindall will go through now into the final to take on Gary Phillips, the win of 589 at 381 kilometres an hour. Looking at it on replay, you'll notice the very close reaction times off the start line, but both cars start moving towards the centre line. Harker is unable to control it. He literally has to get off the throttle to put the front wheels back on the ground. Tindall, on the other hand, drives through for the win.
From another angle now, you can't steer the car if the front wheels aren't on the ground, and that was the case for Harker, dancing its way out to half track, and unfortunately a little bit too sideways, forced to lift off it, crosses the centre line. From another angle now, we have a look at how close the cars actually come. Harker on a mission comes within around about 10 feet of Stan Tindall. A great run there in Top Alcohol. Time now for the semi-finals of Top Fuel Eliminator. It's come down to 3 cars. Jim Reed up against Robin Kirby for the first pairing though.
Yes, Robin Kirby with a great 5:30 in the first round, but Jimmy Reed, certainly the performer of the weekend so far. He has qualified with a 494, 499 in the semi-finals. He's just been recrowned the Australian champion. He's just reset the Australian record. He's going to be hard to beat for this race, Nathan.
Yes, certainly is. He's also the only man in the country to run back-to-back 4-second passes, a feat which the team is very, very proud of. Don't discount Robin Kirby, though. We always talk about the consistency of this man and how he is able to bite you.
Yes, Jimmy Reed always rates Kirby as one of his greatest opposition for the simple reason that Kirby's been able to get around much more fancy competitors quite regularly, and Kirby has raced all around Australia. He's raced internationally, and the number of wins he's done in times where people have thought he had no show at all, he's a very first competitor.
You can see Robin Kirby on screen now, plenty of concentration in his eyes, looking to try anything he can to get around the likes of Jim Reed. Jim has certainly been the hottest contender here this weekend. Mikres wants to be the first to run 300 miles an hour, but the way the speed has been going so far with Jim Reed running 295 miles an hour and qualifying around 287 miles an hour in the first round, he's looking the favourite at the moment.
As they move into stage, you'll notice after the back, all the crews check the fuel system, they check the parachutes, they make the cars sure the car's okay, then they signal them into stage.
Both cars heading into stage. Let's have a look at them off the start line now. Kirby's in, Reed's in. Both cars get away nicely. Jim Reed heads for the centre line, as does Kirby. Very, very close, but it's going to be Jim Reed who gets there first. Let's have a look at the clock. So 5:01, that car is so consistent. 433 kilometres an hour. The speed's down a little bit from what we've seen him run earlier on.
Yes, Reed on replay, they're both off the start line. Close reaction times, but already after the 60-footer, Reed's moving away. Both cars moved towards the centre line. Reed got very close, and I think it looked like he shut down just as he got to the traps.
Let's have a look at it from another angle now. Watch both cars dive towards the centre line. As a matter of fact, the header flames overlap. As the cars come past the finishing line, look to the racetrack and watch the tyre marks. See how close they come to that centre line. Kirby also going deep into the braking area there.
Yes, Kirby dropping cylinders on the right-hand side. Reed's thing is on a number, but obviously he's had to pedal it to pull it back off the centre line, and then he shuts it down just as he gets to the finish.
Well, a great pass there. A huge crowd waiting in anticipation for this run. A solo pass. Mikres is going straight into the final to meet Reed, but he wants that 300 miles an hour.
Yes, a lot of work done in the Mikres and Rapisarda pit over the weekend, and especially between 2 rounds. But these guys are serious about running some big numbers. The car, I would say, has got a lot of clutch in it, a lot of horsepower in it, and it's a matter of whether or not the track will hold it now.
It certainly is the case. You know that when Mikres is doing the tuning, it's going to have plenty of clutch off the start line, and it's never ever short of horsepower. You can see the crew there just checking underneath the car, all over the engine, looking for any leaks, any problems with it.
The crew, vital for a car like this, despite the fact that the driver is control. Outside his driving capsule, the crew is most important. He can't see what's going on. It's up to them to tell him that the car's okay.
Watch this car off the start line, carries the front wheels, gets out hard, but the chutes come out early. There goes his run.
Well, I'd say there's some unhappiness in the Mikres Rapisarda team. That's a shame. That was a great run and wasted because, unfortunately, the parachutes come out. Now, looking at it on replay, off the start line, the car leaves beautifully, wheels up in the air, starts to move around, but the parachute shook out, Nathan.
Yes, from another angle now, you can see how the front wheels were dancing. Look at the header flames, nice and clean. The car was charging, still ran at 5:33 with the shootout all the way down the racetrack. We'll have a look at it now from behind and just see how early it came out.
The parachutes literally shook out at about the 60-foot mark by the time it blossomed before the end of the concrete, and Ray Ward very unhappy.
So Glenn Mikres said looking to improve for the final of Top Fuel Eliminator. We'll have that coming up a little bit later on in the show. Time now for the final of Top Door Slammer. We've seen some awesome showing from these guys so far. 220 mile an hour nearly from Victor Bray in the first round. He's about to move forward as we speak. awesome burnout from Victor Bray. The crowd go wild once again. He's been doing nothing but huge ones all evening. Now it's Peter Gratz's turn. Gratzy just gets the required amount of heat in those big Goodyear rear tyres. Battle of the 57 Chevys, battle of the oils, Castrol for Victor Bray, Valvoline for Peter Gratz. Valvoline stepping up their involvement with Gratz. He has defeated Victor Bray on quite a number of occasions. As a matter of fact, this is nearly a carbon copy of last year's grand final, top door slammer final. It was Gratz and Bray. Gratz the victor on that occasion. Who will it be this time? Well, we're going to have to just wait and see, aren't we? Victor Bray on screen now. Everybody knows that name in drag racing. He's a very tough competitor. But as a matter of fact, Peter Gratz has been a little bit more consistent over the last couple of race meetings and is definitely in a good position to make the upset of the evening, if you will. Gratzy's into stage. We wait on Victor now. Victor pulls on the pre-stage light. You can hear the revs starting to pick up. Victor will bump it into stage. We'll see the one flash of all three ambers. Both cars side by side, they head for half track. Who's it gonna be, Gratz or Bray? I can't pick it. Peter Gratz gets there. A 682 beats a 677. It was the whole shot from Gratz that got it, but 220 miles an hour for Victor Bray. Let's look at it on the replay. You can see Bray about 200 foot off the start line. The car got a little bit loose. He may have had to backpedal it. Now look at the top end charge from the Castrol car. Not enough to catch Gratz though. From another angle, Gratz definitely has the jump in the first half of the track. We can see Bray there, just close to the centre line. He had to pedal it. He had the top end charge, but it wasn't enough to catch Peter Gratz. The Valvoline bumper to bumper 57 takes it away. You can see the crew absolutely ecstatic with their performance, and Victor Bray is defeated. Peter Gratz, congratulations to the whole team.
Well, you've beat Victor again. Is there anything you would like to say to him just to rub it in a little bit?
Well, yeah. When I said to him I wanted to be a thorn in his side, he said I was more of a pain in the ass. Well, to tell you the truth, I was being polite. That was more what I was thinking about. So yeah, I intend on being a pain in his ass all the time, and I intend on pushing him all the time and not to let him have it easy.
Time now for the final of Top Alcohol Eliminator, and it's come down to these two, Stan Tindall and Gary Phillips.
These two competitors have battled for the championship all year. It's been Phillips or Tindall top qualifying and generally into the final. Gary Phillips has already secured the championship, unfortunately for Stan Tindall, but the guy who wins the race takes the money tonight.
That certainly is the case. The championship may have already been wrapped up by Phillips, but this is the grand finale. You can see once again the ice forming on the top of the butterflies. Conditions have got a little bit cooler. It is the end of the night, and already the car's starting to form ice on the butterflies.
Yes, this is a real risk for the crews. They've got to make sure that their throttle doesn't stick and make sure that the engine will make enough power. The decision that the crew chiefs would have had would be in the clutch and the horsepower combination given the changing conditions.
You can see Phillips's car there sports a rather larger rear wing than that of Stan Tindall. Tindall on screen now. You tend to hear Tindall just building the revs up a little bit, making sure that the butterflies are okay. Just brings the revs up a little bit. You can see the raw fuel pumping out of the pipes. His wife Nola just leaning over to check the computer system out, looking for leaks at the same time.
Gary Phillips there just making sure his glasses are clean. Under the cool air with the warmth of the engine, you also find that things like the fogging of the visors and so forth come into play on this sort of racing. So the crews are very, very particular about how the car's positioned prior to going down to the racetrack.
Not too far away from the stage now. The car's just edging forward. You can hear the revs starting to build up. Both cars into stage. The starter sends them on their way. Front wheels in the air for Phillips. These are a little bit loose. Actually turns into a long way loose. Side by side, it's so close. Who got the win?
Gary Phillips takes the win with a 591 at 388 kilometres an hour. It must have been oh so close at the top end. Looking at it on replay now, you'll notice that Phillips picks up the front wheels off the start line, but he gets to about a third track and it really gets loose. The benefit that Phillips has is he's got 15 kilometres an hour over the top end in speed difference, and he was able to just catch the other dragster at the top end.
You can see how Phillips's front wheels were a long way off the deck. He's had to pedal it. The car's sideways. Tindall's out in front, but it's that extra 9 mile an hour, that top end charge from Phillips, that carried him through for the win. And what a win it was. An extremely wild ride for Gary Phillips.
Yeah, it was. It was a little bit longer than a quarter of a mile, but sort of expected it from the previous round, and the thing had its tongue hanging out from 1,000 foot on, but I got off it once or twice, and then I saw him and I thought, I think I'll give you a run for your money. Let's see what happens. And it worked out okay, but I guess it was one of those deals where the light really counted, you know, but we'll take it.
Time now for the final of Top Fuel Eliminator, and how many times have we seen these two meet up against each other? Jim Reed and Glenn Mikres.
Yes, fierce rivals, and either can win. That's the name of the game. Both have the capacity, the product, and the horsepower to win this race.
Mikres on screen now, just completing his burnout. We've been talking about 300 miles an hour all night, but no one's seen it yet. And these two are meeting each other in the final of Top Fuel Eliminator, maybe this time.
Well, whatever happens, we're going to have a heck of a race there. Reed certainly has had the consistency this event. Mikres, on the other hand, very unlucky in the semi-finals where that parachute fell out. Still ran a 5:33 trailing the parachute, so he certainly has got the horsepower. It's going to be a matter of who's made the right decision about the clutch and the horsepower combination.
Well, Jim Reed has had clutch problems for the last couple of years, and at the Winter Nationals they discovered their problem. Ever since then, the car has been very consistent and killer quick. Low 5s and 490s very, very regularly. Mikres, on the other hand, he's always got the power, but it's just become a matter of consistency with his team. They've always had little problems that have struck them, either the clutch has been playing up or like the parachute, which we saw in the last round. All things which are only minor, but are holding the team up just that little bit.
Cars now being checked prior to going into final stage. This is the grand finale, the Australian Drag Racing Series 1996. The championship has been decided already. Jim Reed has won that, but Mikres wants to win the race.
Mikres has gone straight into stage there. You can see him pulling both pre-stage and the stage lights on very, very early. We wait on Reed. Both cars into stage. Mikres is out a long way. Reed shuts the car off early, but Mikres has run wide. I'm not sure he's gone off the track for sure in the braking area. We'll have to look at the replays. Jim Reed it is who's the victor. A 6:32 at only 243 kilometres an hour. Mikres with a 498, 287 miles an hour, but unfortunately ran off the racetrack.
A whole shot for Mikres off the start line. Reed, on the other hand, is having to pedal the car to get over tyre shake. Mikres drives right through with a great run, but he's off the side of the track to be disqualified.
Let's have a look at it now from the top end of the racetrack. You can see Mikres straight away pulls out in front. Reed on and off the throttle. The car looks good, but at about half track turns the tyres. Now it floats towards the sideline and runs just off the side of the track. Bad luck for Glenn Mikres. It was a good pass. Jim Reed here, the winner of Top Fuel Eliminator at the Grand Finals. But is it the way he wanted to win the event?
No, definitely not. As a matter of fact, I seen Glenn run off the racetrack, and I heard when I got to the other end, when I took my helmet off, I heard the PA saying congratulations to Glenn for his win and whatever, and I thought, oh well, no one's noticed it, I'm not saying anything. And next minute I heard, hang on a moment, there's a problem here. And so it was poetic justice, really, because I think you've seen what happened down there on the start line, didn't you? There's a little bit of shenanigans with the staging, and then the guy presses the button too damn quick, and it was all over.
Well, congratulations, Jim, on your new Top Fuel title and the win here at the Grand Finals.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps it up here from Eastern Creek Raceway. Thanks for your company. We trust you enjoyed all the action from the 1996 Australian Drag Racing Series Grand Finale.
Coming up after the break, we look back on the final round of the 2009 Australian V8 Super Road Championship from Cabarita Beach in New South Wales.